this? Is Trump walking back, or is he simply waiting, preparing for his ground troops to arrive to the region? How do you make sense of this?
It's not easy to make sense of a president of the United States that just brazenly lies in a way that is exposed immediately. So there were no talks, much less what Trump said, of great progress and comprehensive deals. So there are, of course, many theories, and I don't think we can absolutely land on one of them as being decisive. One theory, which I think really needs to be taken seriously, is that Trump confabulates, meaning that he lives in a delusional world. I believe he is a mentally ill man. And a lot of psychologists believe that he's suffering from the frontotemporal dementia combined with the underlying pathology of malignant narcissism, meaning the guy's a megalomaniac, the guy is a narcissist, the guy is a psychopath, and that's been true his whole life. But that in addition to that, he's losing it. He's been nasty, but he's losing it. Okay, that's the psychological interpretation. I think we should not put it aside because Trump is extraordinarily erratic right now. His sentences are not coherent. Sometimes the words are not coherent. And while this is kind of brushed aside to get to the political or tactical analyses, I think this needs to be taken very seriously. In fact, I've spoken over many years about Trump's mental state, his dark triad personality, his obviously psychopathic, obviously narcissistic. What the psychologists have told me for many, many years is that the conditions would worsen. And recent analyses by the psychologist, by several, say that there are all the evidences of a greater impulsivity, a lack of speech capacity in the ways that phonemic paraphrasia is one condition, which means you don't finish the words properly. So this, I think, is very real. Then there is, a second kind of purely tactical possibility, which is Trump, idiotically, because I think it's undeniable the man's just not smart. So he painted himself into a corner with an impulsive 48-hour threat. He couldn't fulfill it. The markets were tanking in Asia. Trump can't stand the markets tanking in the United States, so he had to do something. And this theory is, he's just so stupid that the best thing that he can come up with is a lie that is disproved within moments. That's plausible too, that this is just backing off from something because he's not very clever. A third possibility, which many people subscribe to and is not mutually exclusive, is that he or his cronies are front-running the markets. And so the markets are swinging. They make announcements. They knew that this would cause stock markets to rise, oil prices to fall. And all you have to do is have a 1-minute advance notice of what the president's going to say, and voila, you can make millions of dollars in the easiest possible pickings. And there are people who are analyzing that there are mysterious trades in the market a minute or two before market opening and so forth. I don't discount this at all because the brazen corruption of this administration is beyond belief. What's also true, of course, is that Trump says anything, anytime, but the deeper movements of troops says that we're going to have a ground invasion of some kind, with the thousands of Marines heading towards the region. It hardly seems like we're at this great diplomatic breakthrough that Trump is talking about. And as time goes on, from these announcements a couple of days ago, the Iranians have said repeatedly, no, sorry, there's no negotiations with the Americans this way, that way, directly, indirectly, but the Marines keep coming. And bottom line, Glenn, I think Trump is without any plan at all. I don't think that there is any military strategy clear. I think he's flailing around. I think he's psychologically disordered. And so if this is at least partly confabulation, that he thinks there were negotiations, it wouldn't shock me, although it's hard to prove. But if you cut through everything and ask a different question, not why did he do it, but what's going to happen, I think we're on a path of escalation. Obviously, despite the great progress that Donald Trump talked about, immediately there was shelling by Israel of Tehran. There was counter missile attacks by Iran on Israel. There wasn't the slightest hint of any pause in anything. And we know that the Marines are on the way. So this is an escalating battlefield, extraordinarily dangerous, and I don't give any credence at all to bilateral negotiations. I have one maybe vain hope that won't pan out at all, but I have one hope that's not based on negotiation, but on a different kind of diplomacy, which is that Presidents Putin and Xi and Prime Minister Modi, who represent a lot of the world and are powerful countries, will say clearly to Donald Trump, probably in private, you've got to stop this. This is completely out of control and unacceptable. And that hasn't quite happened yet, but I think that is, for me, the only hope that I have for a diplomatic off-ramp. It's not based on negotiation. It's based on basically someone or three leaders of considerable stature saying to the President of the United States, this is the reality. You can bullshit all you want on your True Social and all the rest, but this is the reality. The world's about to go up in flames. If you continue this way, you've got to stop.
Well, I agree with your character description of Donald Trump. It's hard to disagree. But the problem seems to be much wider, though. That is, it's not just Trump. I saw the former head of the MI6 give an interview where he made the point that Iran has the upper hand now, and it appears that the US miscalculated. But it's not just this one miscalculation. It's not only the United States. We also miscalculated with Russia. We thought that their economy would break the first week. We thought that they would be beaten on the battlefield. We thought they would be isolated internationally. We miscalculated with China. We thought that their ability to resist this economic war, the tech war, that simply cutting them off from the semiconductors, their economies will begin, their industries will begin to fall apart. Oh, where does this come from, though? Because we seem to underestimate all our opponents these days. Is it simply no respect for them anymore? I mean, same with the Iranians. I made the point that the Iranian government has it has some popular support. It's it's powerful. The same with Russia. I make the point. They consider this to be an existential threat. They're powerful. They're able to, they will fight back. They have both the capabilities and the intentions to fight back. But yet we always underestimate. How is it possible that we are not able to assess our opponents in a rational manner?
Yes, this is extremely important. Basically, uh, the quality of governance in the United States, even the governance to go to war or the governance to make an attack, is extraordinarily low, shockingly low. And this is a crisis of basic competence. Of course, it can be even worse. It may be a crisis of dementia. And in the previous president, we also had at least 2 years of dementia as a part of the U.S. administration. So it could be that basically we've had 2 presidents in a row with dementia. And this is not at all impossible as part of the explanation. But there's something more that's real and dramatic. I was in Beijing earlier this week and for the recent days. China just finished its 2 sessions, meetings of the senior political branches, and unveiled the 15th 5-year plan. And I spoke with many leaders in China and many participants in the planning process. So we had a deep discussion about the 15th plan. That was a plan that was undertaken over a 2-year period. Tremendous amounts of consultation, expert committees, think tanks across the country, leading academic specialists participating. It's actually a remarkable mobilization of brain power and thought that goes into this. And then the premier, Li Qiang, last week presented the work program of the government and reviewed the 2025 work program. And it's about a 50-page document in English, the one that I read. And it was a very detailed discussion of the work program. Okay. Now I compare it with the United States. Of course, there's no plan at all. There's not a 1-year plan. There's not a 1-month plan. There's not a 5-year plan. There's nothing. Then we had our State of the Union. That used to be an occasion that dates back 2 centuries in which the president would send a report to the Congress of the State of the Union. That used to be substantial documentation. What is the State of the Union now? It's a jeering show. It's a public TV show this year for Donald Trump to rant, for the U.S. hockey team to stand up, for somebody who's got a medal to stand up, to tell stories, to berate the Democrats in the case of Trump's speech. There was no work program discussed. There was no state of the nation other than phony sound bites. This was the opposite of any kind of serious approach to governance. So I feel this across the board. Of course, I'm not in military planning. No one asked me. But I'm watching the economic activities of the government. It's completely haphazard, totally haphazard. The whole tariff war last year, which disrupted the world economy, was seat of the pants, impulsivity, crazy, naive explanations of what was done. And from my point of view, from the first day, absolutely doomed to fail in achieving any of the actual economic objectives that were stated because it was so primitive in its formulation. And I thought brazenly illegal from the start. And the work of 4 or 5 people only. This was not the work of a bureaucracy that had trained analysts that had made an explanation. There was a 1-pager from the U.S. trade representative that I wouldn't have passed a first-year trade student for producing. It was an absurdity. And so I see that repeatedly in any sphere of public policy issues that I'm dealing with. And it's rather clear that the same is true even on these military issues, because we hear the leaks. We hear from Joe Kent. We hear from the leaks from the Joint Chiefs. We hear the leaks from the CIA, that none of this is planned. None of it makes sense, explaining to Trump that the idea that a decapitation strike is going to lead to regime change is very unlikely to succeed. We have stories, true or not, who knows, but stories that Netanyahu talked Trump into this at a personal level. What we have is a complete collapse of institutionalized rational processes. This is true across all our government. It's amazing anything works, by the way. Really, nobody does any serious work. Everything is a game. Everything is a soundbite. Everything is an impulse. And it seems that this is how this bombing went, that they were going to bomb, and then Donald Trump was going to pick the next supreme leader, as he said, and there was going to be unconditional surrender, and that we were going to live happily ever after. And when that delusion failed within a few minutes, they didn't have a next plan. And so it's improvisation from morning till night. You wouldn't think that this is how this is done, but you wouldn't think that a person like Trump could actually be president of the United States, much less a CEO of a significant business. I mean, it's amazing. But it's normalized, Glenn. You know, Trump says these things, and then all the newspapers, instead of asking, is the man crazy? Or how could he say there are negotiations when there were none? They don't say that. They say, well, will Donald Trump succeed in the negotiations? As if this is a serious thing rather than technical term, shit show. Because there's no seriousness in this right now. It's total improv.
Well, the situation isn't great on the other side of the Atlantic either. I mean, in Europe, there's so many, a lot of these countries, they're, multi-parties, so many